What is going on, Badger fans? Let's shift to week 2. Let's talk a little recruiting as well. We got Nick Osen joining the show. Always excited. Let's get new perspective. What are we looking for week 2? And maybe some surprise players to be on the lookout for on Wisconsin. Let's go Locked On Badgers.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. Appreciate the heck out of all of y'all. Time is the most important thing we got. You're spending a little bit here. Thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, or as sports starts to gear up, I should say, FanDuel is here to make your moments a little bit more. Head over to FanDuel, FanDuel.com to get started. And let's get that dude on the show. We got Nick Osen joining again. Yeah, you're really getting into platinum tiers now. Like there's a lounge benefit. Like you've been on I think 4 times. You're starting to unlock some things here, Nick.
I've got this as number 6 with you, my man. But it's always a pleasure, man. Truly, like one of my favorite parts of this, has kind of been jumping here and there into the podcast community. So it's been a beautiful thing, and excited to turn the page a little bit with you this week.
Yeah, I think and when I say we collectively, we've all kind of chopped up week 1 enough. I want to start with recruiting, right? 25 recruiting, the people we've seen. And you and I did an episode before the season. Like, who are some people we're excited to see film on? Let's talk about some of the people you have seen film on in the 25 class. They're putting that senior film together. What are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I'll take one film and then let you in a little bit to somebody I just saw in person too, which is as good if not better. Nick Clayton has been blowing me away. I believe you mentioned him on your list when we had. I think I had 5, you had 4 guys, and man, you were spot on. I know some of our other friends were really excited about him. I think his explosiveness and his footwork have really jumped out at me. So I've been impressed there. I know you asked about 2025, but I like Jarin Mock's second game here recently a lot, better than week 1. I thought he looked very calm, in command, in control. So that was terrific. And I think I've got to mention Eugene Hilton's week 2. I believe he had just over 200 yards or around there, 198 maybe, 3 touchdowns, back and forth game, but he looked really good, Ryan. Those are a few, man, so far, at least film-wise, that I've been loving. What about you?
No, the Clayton one's a great one because he gives you something that is so easily identifiable on film. That burst and that bend off the edge is explosive. And I think he's looked phenomenal. And that's something, quite frankly, this defense needs more of anyway, that athlete in space. I'm curious with your thoughts on Mock, because I watched his first game, which we kind of talked about in our Discord as well. And it was like, very young. You never judge quarterback like that early, right? And say, one way or the other. I thought he was a little inaccurate, maybe a little shaky in his first game, but I didn't see his second one. What'd you see in his second one that made you feel a little better?
Yeah, so I didn't see the first one. I only saw his numbers, and I believe my colleague Evan Flood did a story, and I know that some of your people had been talking about it, as well, kind of throughout or on my boards. But I just felt like he looked a little bit, calmer, more comfortable in command, some more of that accuracy, showed a touch of the mobility too. And it's worth noting that first week 1 game was against, I believe, one of the top programs really in that region, that Northeast, Ohio kind of region. And like you said, he's young, new program for him this year too. And I think that we're both I know I'm super high on his potential. I think kind of our whole group is pretty excited about him eventually being in Madison. But I do want to note also with 2025s, guys, I saw Jamari Washington in person down in Chicago last Saturday. Anytime I can go watch some football, obviously some commits, some targets that we'll touch on, I'm excited. But, man, he impressed me. I did a national story a couple weeks ago, and I said that he might be Wisconsin's most underrated recruit. And now I feel pretty good about that, Ryan. I got to talk with him standing right next to him. I'm not tall, but I'm not tiny like that. And he's got the size. I mean, he's a legitimate 6'1", 6'1.5", maybe 6'2" with shoes at the corner position. He's got the frame to fill out more. He's long, but he's still, rangy. He plays physical, even though he's not the biggest corner. Good ball skills. They didn't test him much, though. It was kind of like Rico Hallman in the game. They threw at him twice, once in the first, once in the fourth. It would have been 1 for 2, but the catch was -3 yards, so he got right up there. took the receiver in the backfield, and then the other great coverage and an incompletion. So I know that you like kind of that corner type, the high ceiling potential. Man, when I left Morgan Park and Marist game, I was impressed.
Man, that is awesome intel, as always, which, again, you're just grinding. I loved his film. Like, when he first committed, and you mentioned physicality, like, as a corner on the edge in the boundary, what offenses have done is they've isolated corners because they've created more space, right? More receivers, more space. You have to tackle in the open field. I thought that's something Fort Greene did a great job week 1, blew up a receiver screen. Lofi came down and got a great tackle at the line of scrimmage. His physicality, Washington, as a high school kid, he just eats up people, and that's going to play so well in the Big Ten with his size. So yeah, you're just echoing, I think, what the film saw. That's awesome. Talk to me last thing on the 25 class. I want to ask you here, like, what more is in this class? Do you think, like, what meat is potentially still in the bone? Asking whatever you're willing or able to share. Obviously, you got some stuff you got to keep, but like, what? I know Byron Lewis is a name out there. Gentry still floated in and out. Like, what is this class still looking to add?
Yeah, so you know what I'm kind of comfortable getting into. Byron Lewis is a name for sure. He's got a date coming up here soon for a commitment. The most buzz that I've kind of heard recently has been between two schools, Wisconsin and Florida State. But I'm not throwing that out there to get a ton of people's hopes up. I haven't dug like crazy into it within the last week or so, with obviously things coming up and the games. And again, when that commitment date is set, often a player has his decision. A lot of the intel that I had heard late in the summer was that he maybe wasn't going to leave Florida. So I'm not even sure, quite honestly, like the levels of push from either side recently is kind of what I would say there. So I'd like to, yeah, of course, check in here and there with people close to him or the recruitment ahead of that one. But he's been a name, and Wisconsin's been a school mentioned, of course, throughout, and the staff has done a really nice job there. I pegged that for a while between like Miami, Florida State, Wisconsin, and then I'm not convinced that he will be leaving there, even though Florida State's gotten off to a rough start. I mean, you've got Badgers fans worried. Florida State actually looks really bad, like pretty objectively speaking. And in addition, Zay Gentry, so for a while, he's obviously committed to SMU, and Wisconsin's deep in the mix, and I believe they still are. Some Baylor buzz has been percolating a little bit recently. I know that we talked about that a little bit in Platteville because I think it's a little bit hard at times. Like if Wisconsin were maybe closer to Texas, I think he'd already be a Badger. But those are kind of the three schools that I'm really monitoring. And I personally, from my last check-in, say 3-4 weeks ago, I don't believe there will be a final decision for a little while. I know that you've shared some things on that recruitment too. And then otherwise, man, good senior film. I think if a really, really good tailback pops, I could see that maybe making sense, even though we're pretty set. You'd think that the running back room that they've got in Madison right now, which I've got some features coming about later this week. I think that D-line is always a spot, especially when you see what an injury can do. You always keep an eye out, but I think Xavier Ponu's commitment was really big. I think they're comfortable at receiver, comfortable at tight end. Maybe if a corner jumps off the page, if Gentry isn't coming up, because obviously with kind of what happened with Raheem Stroud. But again, the youth and depth is phenomenal there. I mean, I know you're a couple years older than me, man, but I don't remember years where the depth at corner was expected to be this good in this program. They've developed it well, but we haven't seen this level of like elite recruits, guys like Xavier Lucas coming in ready to go from the jump. So those are a couple positions I would say. And just from speaking with a lot of commits recently, and I've got some more coming up, it sounds like this group is really, really pretty close knit. And, I'd be surprised. You always be careful not to say promising and things like that in this day and age, but I expect this class to stick very well.
Yeah, you hit on something there that I think is interesting. You almost hit on best BPA, best player available, right? If something pops at one of 4 or 5 spots down through senior film, or maybe you get an inkling that someone's wavering at a certain school, right? You have the ability, this staff, to pounce on a couple different spots and just add an athlete somewhere. But I agree with you. I think it's the depth in the secondary is as good as I remember it. And I appreciate you being kind by just saying a couple years older. It's a few more than that, but like, I appreciate the kind heart. Bless your soul. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to keep Nick here. We're going to come back and talk some 26 recruiting, some of the people he's keeping an eye on, and then get into some, again, shifting the page, going to week 2. What are we looking for the Badgers? Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at eBay Motors. I'm going to keep Nick on for this one because, Nick, you drive, right?
Absolutely. I was just actually having a conversation with my buddies how much I drive for my job, man.
So you drive, you have a car. What if I told you there was a place you don't even have to get dressed to go get car parts? You don't even need to put on pants. You can just go online. You get the best parts, the biggest inventory at the cheapest prices. You're not a millionaire, right? At least not yet.
Not yet. No, a few years away from that still.
A few years away, maybe a few NFTs away. Well, like there's this place out there, eBay Motors, Nick, right? Like I said, you drive, you're not a billionaire. You can go there, get all the parts you need. They got over 122 million parts for your car, your ride or die. I've seen it. You've got a nice ride or die. You got to keep that baby alive. She's getting you to Platteville. She's getting you to all these places, right? Keep it alive. Go to eBay Motors. I'm going to send you the link. It's just ebaymotors.com. I'm not going to send you. I'm just going to tell you the right parts, the right fit, the right prices. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Exclusions do apply. All right, let's get back to our show here. Now, let's talk some 2026 recruiting. Nick, who are some guys that either you're really intrigued by, you've seen impressive film by, or the Badgers have recently offered? Who do you want to talk about in the 26 class?
Yeah, a little bit of a mix to all of those, my man. So down in Chicago, I was able to see 2, pretty high targets, pretty big targets for Wisconsin, live and in person. I saw one of them play, and then another target was, I was very fortunate. He took some time to just meet with me and talk. So we'll start with him. Defensive lineman King Liggins out of Brother Rice High School in Chicago. Liggins is a really, really big time player. He was like a top 35, I think 40-ish rated D lineman. The class is starting to fill out. So he's around the top 50 guy out of the Chicago area. Good size, really, really good eval from Wisconsin at camp. And I told my readers, sometimes I'll give you a nugget here first, here and there. Readers are all over this. I did kind of a notes section from my travels. Man, if he made his decision today, I do like the chances of him ending up as a Badger. I think Wisconsin's doing a terrific job. Multiple coaches, multiple staffers. Michigan could be a school to watch there. I don't believe they've offered, but he plans to visit, and they're in some communication. A couple Kansas schools are up there, but Coach Whitlow, Fickle, Pat Lambert, Max Steinecker, part of that group, doing a nice job. So I like his build. And Ryan, a player that I actually saw play, I've seen him play another sport, basketball, a couple times, getting to know him a little bit. Yeah, Nas Rankin, Jamari Washington's teammate at Morgan Park. So I think he likely ends up playing, he could be a nickel corner or corner in some spots. I think he's likely a safety at the next level, but he was exclusively playing wideout in this game. And he is a legitimate weapon with the ball in his hands, just like Jamari Washington. He is super competitive, a leader, but leads with his example, with intensity. I was really impressed seeing those two. And again, nobody is recruiting this young man as well as Wisconsin. USC is starting to dig in there a little bit. Obviously, we just saw them play at the end of the weekend, so they're a school to potentially watch. But he's gotten up here. He plans to get back for a visit, and then it's a fresh update. I just got off the phone with this player a couple hours ago. A new offer, Trayshawn Ruffin. We talk about D-line so much. I believe he's from the North Carolina area. Just visited Florida State. Badgers offered, Coach Whitlow offered just last night, and it's early there. I'm not going to say anything crazy. He does seem intrigued by some SEC schools, but it felt like he and the staff hit it off early on enough to maybe get a visit or a visit in the spring. It's early for him. I think we've got him as a high 3-star, but some of these early offers, like Wisconsin, Florida State, Georgia's at least showing interest. Those could lend itself to a 4-star rating. So those are a few names I've been writing about this week, my man.
Let me ask you this. Let's linger on defensive line recruiting for just a tick, because that is a spot where depth needs to be rebuilt a little bit. What has been a new coach? Badger fans are still kind of getting to understand Coach Whitlow, what he's like on the recruiting trail, what kind of coach he's going to be at Wisconsin. I like the track record, but what has his messaging been? How have recruits kind of responded to him?
That's an awesome question. This is a reason that, part of why I think they got Torrin Petaway in the 25 class, Ponu, basically, and I've got a really good quote from King Liggins coming out. I think by the time people listen, that story will probably be out. I've got it mostly written. he's not somebody. He's like Matt Mitchell and even Coach Fickle. He doesn't sugarcoat. Kind of like how the Badgers got Nick Clayton in the fold. Like they're not afraid to say what they expect. Like, hey,
Mhm.
we're going to coach you hard. Hey, this is what we need to see, type of thing. But we're going to develop you. We love you, and we got your back on and off the field. And so I don't think Coach Whitlow pretends to hide his passion or intensity. But I think when you couple that with the right kids and the ability to be developed, which he has shown throughout his career, and quite honestly, I've seen it from D linemen from March to August, March to September. I think of an Elijah Hills or even a Ben Barton. I think that really resonates with the right kids. And if it's somebody that's, not looking for those things, maybe it's not the right match. But that's kind of what I've seen, Ryan. I think it's really smart too, because I mean, let's be honest, that is a spot where if you're coming in physically ready and you've got kind of that alpha dog mentality, as they say, like look at Dylan Johnson. You can play after being here for 4, 5, 6 months if you approach things the right way in the D line.
Where would you put him? King Liggins is the guy we broke down his film a while ago. I really liked it. Really, really liked it. Where would you put him in kind of that defense line recruiting tier when you have an Ernest Willard Jr., who was a great pickup, a Dylan Johnson? Is he in that mix? Is he maybe have a little higher ceiling? Or where do you kind of line him up?
Yeah, I need to see some more recent film to kind of get into ceiling, but I'm actually pretty high on his floor. I think that he's already pretty good physically. I know that he's not afraid to play violently, violent hands, explosive in the middle. And there's some good competition within his conference and kind of his area. So that's what I would say. I'm not going to guarantee guys are like Dylan Johnson, like, hey, you can get in super early because as we know, we had him on our 247 freaks list and top 247 and everything for a reason. But I really like the kid. And I just, I saw him at camp. I think Evan did that first article. I've spoken with him recently. I just like the potential bond there, just with kind of that room and Coach Whitlow. But in terms of tiers, yeah, I'd put him as a really high floor guy. And if he continues to, add the right weight, explosiveness, things like that, could be a pro down the line.
Absolutely love it, man. We're going to take one more quick break. We got Nick Osen on the show. Come back, talk about where you can find his great work, and talk a little bit about shifting into week 2. What are we looking for from the Badgers in week 2? That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. Again, like FanDuel, I said this on a previous show, like they've been with us for a good minute because you don't break up good relationships. Like good friendships are here for a while. This is a good one. They've been with us for a hot minute. And, I've been talking about them for years because this is where we go. This is where I go to lose money because I'm not a good gambler, but I enjoy it. It spices up the weekend. I bet on the Badgers. They did not cover week 1. But listen, do it responsibly. I always say that. But if you do that, it's a good time to get on FanDuel.com. And they have a great offer now. You get the first 3 weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket for free. We know the big boy football is coming. That's NFL Sunday Ticket through September 22nd. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Download America's #1 sportsbook and enjoy 3 weeks free of NFL Sunday Ticket if you have the YouTube TV platform. All right, let's get back to Nick, finish up the show. Always super grateful to have Nick on. Always super grateful to have everybody listening. Again, time is the most incredible thing any of us has. So, Nick, thank you for taking a little bit of yours, putting it here. And with that, we
It's
talked
always
about.
a pleasure, man.
Nah, it's you always got an open chair. I tell you this all the time. We talked a lot about, or you've talked a lot about some of what you got coming up. As always, where can people find the work you're putting out there?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So Badger 247. This is an interesting time because I'm hitting on these recruiting updates, seeing commits, but also trying to do some more feature stories focused on these current players. And I did one last week on Vinny Anthony, and I've got one coming out on Cade Yacamelli this week. Somebody that I know caught kind of our friend group eyes in that week 1 victory. So I'm excited about that. Badger 247, 247sports.com. Knock on wood, starting to get a few more national opportunities within Badgers coverage. So we'll keep it rolling.
I love it, man. And let's talk about shifting gears now. So week 2, I hesitate to say adjustments, but because I don't think you make a ton of adjustments necessarily off week 1. But what are you seeing or looking for to be different in week 2?
Yeah, I think adjustments is an okay word for this, Ryan, just because, the head man, Coach Fickle himself, was using it a decent amount, though that was still in reference to week 1 as well. I think it's okay to say because I know you're somebody that's knowledgeable and isn't talking about drastic adjustments, flip the
Mhm.
switch, that type of thing. But I would say I'm looking for a few more explosive plays. I think the players talked about that. Coach Fickle did. And then Tyler Van Dyke, I'll have it in my notebook in a little bit, but he mentioned some of that too today on Tuesday when we spoke to the players. So that's one thing. I'm looking for a little bit more of a pass rush, whether that's kind of driven through, some scheme switches in terms of just like blitzing, guys coming off the edge, or just a little bit more consistency. And that's not to blame a coach or any players because we know it was a run oriented game. And I
Mhm.
do think the linebackers showed some things. I think of a Leon Lowry, Jaheim Thomas, and Christian Alliegro really came to my mind from week one. But those are a couple things, man. And then just maybe a little bit of a faster tempo. Like from speaking with Coach Fickle and the players, they expect South Dakota to kind of try to, what's the word? Methodicalize it, I guess, a little bit and try to kind of knock down the clock, similar to a Western Michigan. But I think it's on Wisconsin to pump that up a little bit because while people do misconstrue what the air raid is about, I do think it should show kind of some of that up tempo, some of that 10 to 14 yards, instead of some of the shorter gains. You don't have to be throwing it 40 every time, but intermediate gains, trust with Van Dyke, Bryson. I'd like to see Vinny Anthony get some looks because of his speed. I think that would really be beneficial, man, going into week two. And then obviously we know who's coming to town in week three in that matchup.
Yeah, you hit on something there. I want to get back to the player availability, but you hit on something in your response there that I've been wondering about, and I want to pick it apart a little bit more. And there was a listener that actually brought it up too. This is from Craig Fissel. Speed up the cadence between plays. We are much slower than the teams Fickle coached in Cincinnati. And it's also slower than the offenses Phil Longo coached at UNC and Ole Miss. And when Longo came in, he talked about tempo a lot, so much so that the reporters were like, we can't keep up with the play cadence in practice. Has it
Really?
surprised you
Okay.
how, and that was the first time they were here, but they were saying we can't even, it's so quick. I don't understand why it's gotten so much slower at times. I'm right there with you. It feels like there's moments where tempo could be beneficial. Has it surprised you a little bit that Longo has played a little more methodically?
Yeah, so I don't have necessarily that exact comparison point because I got here in kind of
Right.
middle early last season. But that said, I do expect that to show a little bit of variety and variance coming up. Like I think we do see some more either tempo in between plays or just going faster tempo within plays, meaning a little bit more of kind of attacking the holes in the zone, going deep, not as much of kind of the methodical 4, 5, 6 yard chunk gains. But that said, I push back with some of my awesome readers and the fans because look, sometimes if you're not trying to show everything that you've got, you just got to take care of the football, show your physicality, and win the game. So that's why I'm glad with kind of your approach and that we are shifting to week two. But don't be shocked to see the run game be such a fixture. And I had written throughout the fall, we talked about it. I still think the run game is going to be the backbone of this offense.
I agree. And I honestly, I thought the run game was fine for what it was. Western Michigan was putting more people in the box. They clearly said, we're going to try to stop the run. We're going to try to gum it up. And I
Hmm.
thought Tyree and Ches, quite frankly, ran their butts off. I thought they ran incredibly hard. And then I want to get into Yacamelli, a guy you mentioned. I wrote on the side of the show here, surprise players. To me, he was kind of the surprise player of week one. Not so much in that we didn't see some of that in Platteville. Like we saw him gash runs. We saw the speed. Like he's a good athlete. But I just didn't expect him to be in the game in the first half so quickly. His role and his usage surprised me a little bit. Was there anybody else that surprised you from week one and that you think could surprise people going into week two?
Yeah, so I think the only thing that surprised me with Yak is just that maybe he got some more reps as well as touches than Jackson Aker.
Mhm.
I think I maybe thought that'd be a little closer, but like I'm high on Cade. I have been since the spring. I think it says a lot about him, like in terms of the depth and competition in that room. That he's not only stuck around, but he has honestly within his own game blown up. And I had a great conversation with him today, so that'll be coming out. Really impressive within his game. I thought Elijah Hills surprised me a little bit. Somebody that I said it on this show and with you as friends. Like I was pumped about that addition for the program. I didn't see a ton necessarily in the spring. I thought he had a good fall, and then like boom, he made that impact in week one. I maybe didn't expect Dylan Johnson, I saw at least 1, 2 impact plays from him, even in like the group setting. I thought that really shows kind of where he is. And then a couple players I expect to see more of. I think I'd probably go with Christian Alliegro because he made an impact within
Yeah.
his snaps. I love that smile. And then this one is not a surprise. I mean, whether you're looking at the film, the quotes, we got a chance to talk with him today, which is telling. But I think Xavier Lucas is going to continue to be likely a fixture in that defense. Just such a like humble, mature, down to earth dude. I mean, I got to know him a little bit throughout the recruiting process, but yeah, a lot of credit to the Badgers for landing him and him for impressing, man.
Dude, I love Lucas. He's a guy who's on the show. I've talked to his dad a little bit offline. And you can tell where he gets that from. Like his dad was a college corner, college safety. And he used to Lucas used to go to the beach in combat boots and do DB drills. Bro, when I go to the beach, I just lay on a towel because this dude was in like combat boots doing drills in the sand. Like there's something wired a little differently about him. And on top of it, he's a physical freak show. So I think those ones are awesome. Last one here on Alliegro, because we had another comment here. This was from Robert Sorensen. Really liked Alliegro. Don't know if it'll happen. And I also see KBJ, but a bunch of people with Alliegro comments really liking Alliegro, wanting to see more of Alliegro. My question is, it's so difficult to get more of Alliegro when you're probably not going to take Thomas and Chaney and those guys off the field a whole lot, right? Like, how do you get him more reps if you're not taking those guys off the field?
Yeah, I don't think you can take Jaheim Thomas off the field. I
Yeah,
mean, to me, he was a top 3 or 4 player on the team week 1, graded out that way too. And you know, Chaney, he's gotten a lot better. He's physically very good. He's a leader, so I'm with you on that. You know, you can mix it up sometimes. Like I wouldn't make the position switch, but I personally think Allegro's athletic enough where he can get some looks at outside or some stunts in the pass rush. Like I think he's legit. You know, there's always special teams where you can make an impact. I believe I saw Tackett Curtis out there for a good amount of special team stuff. So, you know, a lot of these guys we're talking about, at least 3 or 4 of them are still within their first 2 years of college football. So there's time. You know, I saw that comment with KBJ. I'm with that guy. You know, I think KBJ is going to be a really good player. Quite honestly, he caught my eye, certainly at fall camp. And yeah, that inside linebacker room, I think, is really nice. I expect to see maybe a little more from the outside this week, Ryan.
Yeah, I agree with you. The athletics. I'll say this. We'll go out on this one. Yeah, they made plays in that linebacker room that last year just weren't. They weren't capable. Some of the guys weren't probably capable of being made. And it's not a knock on anybody, but Pius, Lowry both had track down things from the backside. I thought
Yeah.
Train hit a couple of people in the hole. I think the linebackers as a whole have to get a little better, and I think they got better in the second half. But athletically, the difference is very clear. So. Nick Osen, I know you need to get out of your. I actually spelled your name correctly. Where I think the first time I kept missing the K on Nick or the L in Osen. So I got your name right, which I'm stoked for. He is Nick Osen 247. Go follow him at the real Nick Osen. I'm Ryan Herrings, Locked On Badgers. We'll talk tomorrow on Wisconsin.